Hey guys, welcome back to my channel where I talk about the NWSL, women's soccer, just soccer, only soccer. So Sally Yates' investigation into the abuse within the USSF/NWSL has come to an end, and the results of the investigation were released on October 3rd, 2022 in a 319-page document. This document is available to the public and I have it linked in the description below. I'm a little late releasing this video/podcast because I spent most of October 3rd reading through this document, particularly focusing on the Paul Riley investigation and the Rory Dames investigation. I wasn't sure how I wanted to do this video, so I just started writing my script and notes and going from there. I did videos last year talking about the abuse allegations against Paul Riley and Rory Dames in great detail, and I'll have them linked in the description below. If this is all new to you or you need a refresher, I suggest watching those and then coming back to this video. That being said, let's get into it. I recommend everyone read through this document, but if I can summarize this 319-page document in a sentence, it would be: players were being abused, staff and owners knew, and they did nothing to stop it. Merritt Paulson and Gavin Wilkinson knew what Paul Riley had done to Monishim and Sinead Farrelly, and still they covered up for him, protected him, hid information, and continued to put players in danger. Paulson was even quoted in an email saying to the Western New York Flash president, Salin, after they hired Riley, "Best of luck this season and congrats on the Riley hire. I have a lot of affection for him." Page 71. According to the investigation, Gavin Wilkinson told Lines that he felt Paul was put in a bad position by the player, and he would hire him in a heartbeat. Page 72. This was about Monishim. Wilkinson right here is blaming Monishim, saying it was her who put Riley in a bad position, completely dismissing everything that happened to her. Worst of all, he would hire Paul Riley, an abuser with a pattern of abusive behavior, again. This was a pattern. The report corroborates Monishim and Sinead Farrelly's stories and added that they weren't Riley's only victims. The investigation covered 2 more victims willing to come forward, and not only that, there could have been more. North Carolina Courage Player A. Player A, a player at the Courage who wishes to remain anonymous, reported experiences similar to Shim's beginning in 2017. When the Athletic article recounting Shim's experiences was published, Player A texted a Courage staff member to disclose her experience. It felt like a weight being lifted off my chest. Frankly, for the last 4 years, I've thought I was crazy. Player A reported that Riley gave and withheld attention, telling her she was good enough for the national team, but he was the coach to get me there. And then tearing me down, then telling me I'm fat. She described Riley's questions about her sex life, his insistence that she needed to improve her sex life because he could tell she was not happy, and his stories about his own sex life. I always thought I was at fault for my feelings because, especially after he called me chubby in 2019, that year all I wanted was the man's approval and to be seen by him. Team management confirmed that Player A had reported feeling uncomfortable due to Riley's comments about her weight and body. Other players observed the dynamic between Riley and Player A. One teammate reflected that Riley seemed to zero in on her, asked her about her personal life, asked her to lunch, and told her he could help her to advance. They observed that her playing time increased along with Riley's attention. When Player A ultimately shared her experience on the NWSL Players Association and NWSL conference call following the Athletic article, her teammates were not surprised. We can see how he did that. Page 54. Philadelphia Independence Player B. Another player at the Independence who chose not to participate in our investigation told others of Riley's sexual coercion. After the Athletic article was published, Player B reached out to Farrelly and wrote, "Paul did many bad things to me. He did exactly the same to me and you. It started with screaming and screaming at me in trainings, and then he would suddenly be the good guy." She recounted that Riley eventually invited her to his room to watch film, and they had sex. and then there was no way back for me. Player B wrote that Riley slept with her for over a year until shortly before she left the team. Player B explained, Paul took control over me in 2010 until I left the club. When she started dating someone else, Riley got so mad she had to stop dating her new boyfriend. She said if she stopped responding to Riley's texts, he told her he would trade her. She said he made sure they lived in the same apartment complex. She recalled crying in her room every night for weeks and ultimately leaving the team to escape the situation because it was a nightmare. He took control of me so easy, and the way out was so hard. One teammate reached out to player B in 2012 after she left the team to ask, I heard that you and Paul maybe had a relationship that went beyond a player and a coach. Is that true? The team owner reached out to her following the publication of the Athletic article after she told him why she had left the team. I am so very sorry about your involvement with Paul. I feel awful for you, Sinead, and any others that were mistreated by Paul in any way. This whole thing has to stop. Pages 54 and 55. Players and staff recounted information they had heard regarding other women who may have been subjected to similar conduct, but those accounts were not to date sufficiently corroborated to include in this report. The individuals who have shared their experiences established that allegations of Riley's misconduct are credible and reflect that Riley's conduct was recurring throughout his tenure in professional soccer. Pages 55 and 56. In 2014, an NWSL survey was sent out to ask players about their experience with the league. Paul Riley had many complaints. Players said of Riley, head coach, ripped/yelled at players in a hurtful, non-productive way. It hurt their confidence and made the team lose respect for him. Another player said verbally abusive head coach. Being subjected to verbal abuse and sexism shouldn't exist in this league by any coach. Another said the staff was not good. Sexism and manipulation highlighted the negative category for me. The combination of poor coaching and a destructive leader sums up our season. Another player said, head coach is verbally abusive. In any other job, he would be fired for how he treats his employees. It was a bad start from the beginning, personally verbally attacking player at halftime of the first NWSL game in Houston. As the season wore on, we got used to being called dumb, stupid, slow, idiotic, retarded. We have no balls. We will never be better than the average 16-year-old boy. Worthless, and the list goes on. Page 60. The league and the USSF did not act in response to the surveys because, according to the investigation, no one reviewed them. The report says USSF President Gulati viewed the surveys as important feedback, but could not recall reading these particular comments, surmising that he overlooked them because he assumed Portland was squared away. The report goes on to say USSF General Counsel Levine viewed the surveys as the primary vehicle for players to register complaints, but she stated that she only reviewed survey results if they were escalated to her. These particular comments were not. USSF CEO Dan Flynn stated, I do not believe I ever personally reviewed them. NWSL Executive Director Bailey also did not recall reading the comments, but thought she likely would have reviewed them. Pages 60 to 61. Honestly, I would fire all of you if I could for being useless. What was the point of the surveys if you weren't going to review them? Did no one think to review them? According to the report, national team representatives from each NWSL team provided the league and USSF with feedback regarding their experiences. Counsel for the U.S. Women's National Team Players Association provided the feedback to the USSF President Sunil Gulati to provide to the team owners at his discretion. The comments regarding Riley include, the head coach created a hostile environment for players. He personally verbally attacked players during/after games. During halftime, he belittles players and verbally abuses players. The team never comes back to win a game if they are losing at the half, and this has a lot to do with the negative environment he creates at halftime. His halftime speeches are not productive and personally attack people. This happened over and over again all season. These complaints were received by the leadership at USSF, the NWSL, and the Thorns. And yet again, no one from the USSF nor the NWSL, Gulati, Flynn, Levine, or Bailey have a recollection of reading or discussing the concerns regarding Riley. There is no evidence to suggest that the Thorns who received the feedback reviewed or acted upon it. Pages 60 to 61. Shim filed a complaint against Riley in 2015, and the Thorns would go on to investigate it. According to the report, the Thorns' investigation into Shim's 2015 complaint against Riley did not end the matter. In fact, the issue of Riley's sexual misconduct was brought to the attention of individuals in the league and or the federation every year from 2015 until 2021. If you guys remember from the Athletic article, Paul Riley made Mana Shim and Shanique Farrelly kiss in front of him so that the team wouldn't have to run a suicide drill or conditioning drill. In 2019, Riley was a candidate for the head coach position for the U.S. women's national team, but Riley would later withdraw. According to the report, North Carolina Courage owner Stephen Malik, when we spoke to him, I'm guessing the investigators when they spoke to him, agreed that the incident in which two players were asked to kiss is completely unacceptable for a national team coach and disqualifying, but expressed his views that it did not disqualify Riley from leading an NWSL club. Page 82. In March and April of 2021, Shim and Farrelly reached out to then NWSL Commissioner Lisa Baird to reopen an investigation into Paul Riley. In May 2021, the NWSL received an anonymous report regarding Paul Riley's behavior when he was at the Thorns. In July 2021, a North Carolina Courage player filed a complaint in regards to Riley's misconduct, discussing a player's weight. According to the report, in September 2021, just after receiving these 4 serious complaints of misconduct against Riley in quick succession, the NWSL commissioner still actively worked to keep Riley in the league. That month, Riley posted angry comments on social media about the league's proposed postseason schedule. On September 7, 2021, Malik texted Baird that Riley had resigned over his and the Courage's fury with the league. The next day, Baird responded, "I had a long talk with Riley and strongly urged him not to resign, and am glad you didn't accept it." In regards to the Paul Riley investigation, I'm just going to leave it here. Again, I recommend reading the document in its entirety because there was so much information that I couldn't include here simply because this video would be too long. The point of why I chose this information to talk about is because there were so many people who knew players were being abused and they did nothing to stop it. They allowed it to go on. It could have been stopped at any point, but it wasn't. They allowed it to go on for so long. And speaking of someone who allowed abuse to go on for so long, Arnim Whisler, I have a bone to pick with you. If I was owner of VfL Wolfsburg and I read through this report, I would end the Chicago Red Stars and VfL Wolfsburg partnership for the safety of my Wolfsburg players. I wouldn't loan out any of my players while you're in charge. I would only agree to a partnership if you sold the club and had no influence or access to the Red Stars in any way. In this section of the video/podcast, I'm going to be talking about Rory Dames, but I'm mainly going to be focusing on Arnim Whisler, who has covered up and has defended Rory Dames in the past, despite receiving reports from players in regards to Dames's emotional, sexual, and mentally abusive behavior. One player who reported Dames was Christen. Arnim Whisler has to be the worst because he knew about Dames's behavior and still defended him and allowed him to continue coaching the Red Stars. According to the report, many insist that Whisler knew about Dames's verbal and emotional abuse of Chicago Red Stars players and inappropriate relationships with players for a decade and did nothing about it. Whisler will tell you he knew nothing, which is a complete lie. Another player said, "When Arnim now says, I don't know anything, that's a lie. He effing knew." Whisler pretends he doesn't know what is going on because he does not want to take accountability. Another player says, Whisler's apologies and feigning ignorance following the November Washington Post article were bullshit. Whisler is lying. He did know. He knows the type of person Rory is. He would look into it if he wanted to know. I think Arnim turned a blind eye towards a lot of things. He was supportive of Rory. Players have been telling Arnim about Dames for years and feel Rory was untouchable because he and Whisler were close. Arnim Whisler knew Rory was a bad man and had heard everything that he's done, but they are friends and didn't want to fire him. Arnim Whisler would say, I know how Rory is. People in the front office knew, and this all plays a huge role in fostering the toxic environment. Pages 120 to 121. According to the report, players have tried to talk to Whisler about Dames' behavior before, but nothing would happen. Whisler was just always so defensive of Rory. In the response to complaints about Dames, Whisler would sometimes go on the offensive and attack a player's credibility and motives for reporting Dames. The report goes on to say one staff member claims Arnim is equally as guilty and complicit as Rory and Rory's coaches. She believes firmly that he knew everything that was going on and he never did anything to address it. She also reported that players stopped going to Whisler with concerns about Dames' behavior because nothing was ever done. So they felt they had to take it. Page 122. In October 2021, a sports psychologist was hired by the Chicago Red Stars following the Athletics article about Paul Riley. The psychologist's report stated, Coach Dames was described as condescending, manipulative, aggressive, insulting, and an intimidator, among other things. 70% of players reported concerning behaviors that are consistent with the generally accepted definition of emotional abuse in sports. Within these episodes of verbal/emotional attack, players reported examples of Coach Dames degrading players' family members and parenting abilities following an on-field mistake, name-calling intended to humiliate and belittle a player, and using threats to incite fear and shame. Page 123. The psychologist would go on to say that she didn't consider Dames' actions and behavior in violation of the NWSL anti-harassment policy because of a loophole in the policy, that such behavior was unacceptable unless in course of generally accepted coaching practices. She noted that while some coaches see yelling and belittling as a means of motivating players, she disagrees and the scientific literature does not support. However, the NWSL's policy's loophole checked her impulse to report the behavior, notwithstanding that she identified it as abusive. Pages 123 to 124. When the psychologist shared her findings and recommendations with Dames, she reported he did not respond favorably. The report goes on to say that after Whisler read the psychologist's report, he knew Dames shouldn't be the coach, and by the end of the day, Dames wasn't. Just after midnight on November 22, 2021, the Red Stars announced Dames' resignation, omitting allegations of abuse and misconduct. When the Washington Post article was published, Whisler expressed a lot of shock about the allegations and said he knew nothing about it beforehand. He sent text messages to players apologizing for what happened and what they went through. So sorry for what had happened to you at the Red Stars and for not knowing or having procedures that could uncover it. A player who received Whisler's text says, Whisler is lying when he says he did not know about Rory's abusive behavior and misconduct. Whisler emphasized that had he known the breadth of what he learned in this 2021 call, he would have acted to remove Dames sooner. Page 125. I'm going to end this section here with this quote from a former player. They state that Whisler should have apologized to all of us for being in this environment. I am doing this investigation because I want him to be out. No one is holding him accountable. he is still not stepping up and being accountable for what everyone has been through. Page 125. And that's the thing. No one is holding Whisler accountable. Whisler needs to be held accountable because his inaction allowed for players to be abused by Dames. He is no better than Rory Dames himself, and probably worse than Merritt Paulson and Gavin Wilkinson combined. How is Whisler not being held accountable? He could have stopped this years ago. He could have stopped this at any time. But instead, he chose to protect Dames, his friend, a serial abuser, over his players. Yates's investigation and report was shocking. Yes, a lot of this may have been stuff that was already reported, things we might have already known. But to see how bad the abuse was, how far things went, how long the abuse was allowed to go on for is unbelievable, incomprehensible, and just heartbreaking. The players, the victims, the survivors, past and present, deserve so much better. The Timbers Army, the 107 IST, and the Rose City Riveters released these statements in regards to Yates's investigation and report. It reads, "While we were prepared for the worst, nothing prepared us for what was contained in the USSF/Sally Yates report. We are seething and we are heartbroken. To all Portland Thorns players, past and present, you will always have our love and support, and words will never convey the pain we feel knowing that you had to endure anything less than the full support, respect, and encouragement of your coaches, staff, and club leadership. You were failed multiple times by many people. As a supporters group, you are an integral part of who we are and what we do. We show up and show our support for you. The findings detailed in this report, and we know there will be more to come, aren't what you and anyone else signed up for. As a leadership group, we were lied to. Although we remain cautiously optimistic at each meeting and in each interaction with the FO, reading the report highlighted the multiple bold-faced lies we were told, both in meetings and in town halls. They said they couldn't speak freely until the investigation results were public. Wait until the results are in before reaching any conclusions, they said. Well, we honored that request. The results are in, and those results are far worse than even the initial reports had indicated. The time for waiting has passed. The toxic culture that allowed these behaviors to exist and continue in our club's organizations runs too long, too deep, and too high. Mike Golub and Gavin Wilkinson have no place in the Timbers and Thorns organization or in Soccer City, USA. And Merritt Paulson and Peregrine Sports need to sell the teams. That's the bottom line. In spite of the challenges, our members have told us repeatedly that they wish for us to remain in conversation with club leadership, keep going to meetings, keep the dialogue going. Having read the investigative report and its conclusions, however, we don't see a way forward anymore. At this point, and for the foreseeable future, the leadership of the 107 IST, Timbers Army, and Rose City Riveters are suspending relations with the Portland Timbers and Thorns Football Club, while the leadership team includes Merritt Paulson, Mike Golub, and Gavin Wilkinson. With playoffs approaching, yes, it means that game days might look different. It's time to build a bonfire. The players make our clubs what they are. We, the supporters of the Portland Thorns and Portland Timbers, strive to make our support in both in the stands and on the streets what it should be every day in Soccer City, USA. To supporters around the globe and to our regional supporters groups, this is it. This is the moment. We'll need every one of us to come together to make our voices heard, from Providence Park to Portland, Maine, and from Paris and the Philippines. We were here before the current leagues and owners, and we will be here long after. Our love for team/town/Timbers Army and Rose City Riveters runs deeper than any league or ownership. My heart goes out to the Timbers Army, 107 IST, the Rose City Riveters, the Thorns and Timbers players, and players across the NWSL. I agree. Golub and Wilkinson need to go, and Merritt Paulson needs to sell the team. He's not the only one, though. Arnim Whisler needs to sell the Chicago Red Stars. The players were failed by the USSF and the NWSL and the owners of these clubs. It's time to do right by the players, both past and present, and cut out the rot. I encourage all of you to read Yates's report. There is a lot in that report that I couldn't include in this video. The report is linked in the description below. It's free and there's no paywall. I wish nothing but love and healing for the players, victims, and survivors. Thank you for coming forward with your stories. I know it's not an easy thing to do, and hopefully your stories will encourage other victims to come forward with theirs, and hopefully they will seek help. That is all I have for you guys today or tonight, and I'll see you all in the next one. Later.